Each night, the demons and ghosts in my head play a game of musical chairs just to see who gets to haunt me. Some days, it's the revenant of my mistakes. It haunts me by replaying my regrets in high definition. I cringe in fear and shame of all that I've done, but I'll take that every night over ghosts of lost loves. The ones who haunt every song, all our favorite spots, my own bed. Worst of all is the demon of doubt that forces me to overthink my own existence, all of my choices, how I see myself, how you see me. Would you respect me if you knew the sum of my sins, the depth of my depravity, the extent of my apathy? I hope you'll never know. I hope I'll be able to sleep.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
May?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
You sound like you're sobbing.
Mm-mm.
Are you drinking again?
Just one.
May?
Yeah.
I thought we agreed that you're going to stop this.
You don't understand. I'm so lonely.
I know, but that's why we have you see a doctor and you have a plan.
I know, but during this time right now, it's just really difficult. You don't understand. I just feel so lonely, alone, and just by myself all the time in my own head. I just don't get it. I just feel like...
Please stop drinking and I will call the doctor now.
I can't. I just need one more.
No. Not one more. I'm calling the doctor now and she's coming over.
No, she's across the street. Don't tell her. Please don't tell her.
No, it's good that she's across the street because you need her now and she's coming.
No,
End of
please.
conversation.
No.
May, I understand what you're going through. And you can come see my office in about 2 weeks. But where's the milk? Hand it over.
No.
Hand it over.
No.
Hand it over.
Just one more.
One more leads to another, like 5 more. Hand it over.
No. Can I just one more?
No, take it. Give it to me. Give it to me. No. This one as well? No.
I'm sorry. I relapsed. It just makes me feel really sad. It's a mental health issue. You know, when you're trapped inside your own mind sometimes, it just gets really pathetic and you feel so sorry for yourself. But that's how I feel right now. Can I have my milk back?
No more milk. No more milk.
Don't chuck my milk away.
It's in the bin.
Well, how can I live without escaping? How can I do that? Where's Salman anyway?
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Co-host.
Oh,
Get it?
yeah.
Co-host.
Alright.
Are you feeling better?
Yeah, I just don't like you for calling the doctor so
Well,
soon.
I thought
I
it
just
was
wanted
good for
one
you.
more.
No more one more. Every time it's one more, then it becomes 2, and then it becomes 4, and then it
It's
becomes
just a hard
8, and
time,
then it
dude.
becomes 10.
Anyway, how's your family?
My family is alright. They're having a big debate on whether we should have a second cat or not, and they're like,
Oh, come on! I've been behind this couch the entire time. We have an interview to do. Come on already. Let's go.
yikes.
I guess we didn't have to introduce Ghazi Al Shebabi this time.
He introduced
He
himself.
introduced himself in a very angry manner.
Alright.
It's okay. I'm getting rid of the milk. Okay, I'm getting rid of the milk. All right. right, let's do this. I would love to. By the way, that was all acting tears, just to let you know I wasn't crying and I don't have a milk problem. Ghazi, welcome to our show. This
Thank you
is
for having
episode
me.
5, and we're so pleased to have you, of course. But we want to understand who you are and what you represent, and introduce yourself and what
So,
you do.
believe it or not, I don't hide behind people's couches for a living. I am a journalist and a poet and just all around nerd, I suppose.
Okay, and how did you? Is it like? Did you study journalism or how did you?
No,
become
no.
journalist?
You'll find this is a running theme of my life. It just happened to me, and I was like, there was a job opening. I signed up, and I've been there for about like 4 years now.
Okay.
Wow.
It's it's one of those like weird jobs that you never know what you're gonna do until the day comes and like, okay, yeah, there was a fire and a press release and something else that happened, and you have to write a bunch of stuff before the deadline, and it's a lot of work.
Okay.
Well, you're such a big representation of exploring darkness and light on the way to happiness, because I mean, your poetry is very much contrast and juxtaposition, if you must. Juxtaposition means like opposites that make sense. So you sort of represent that. I mean, you're funny, but you actually put truth to the world.
Well, like you said, like earlier, it's a big accident of how I use comedy as a coping mechanism, as most people do.
Yeah.
And when it comes to poetry, my writing, I try to be as open and honest with how I'm feeling and what I'm going through. A lot of it deals with depression and anxiety, but there's only so much, oh, woe is me and everything's terrible. I can, I can write. So I try to give it a positive spin, at least a comedic spin.
And that's ironic, because I'm wondering why you chose journalism as a career. And I mean, how has it been so far?
I mean, to say that I chose it as a career is a bit of a stretch.
Right.
Like I said, it was one of those things where I kind of lucked into it, It wasn't something that I ever considered pursuing, but ever since I've got into it, it's been very, like any job, it has its ups and downs, but it has a certain aspect of, telling people stories, which I really like. Being able to talk about like the success stories or any kind of like new things that are happening in and around Bahrain, that's always rewarding. That's always fun.
And if we go back a bit in the past, how did you start writing? And was there anything that attracted you to poetry specifically, or how did that happen?
As any teenager would tell you, there's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of emotions, and you don't know what you're feeling, and you've got all over the place. So I just picked up a pen and I started writing. Initially, I wrote them as songs, but I have zero musical talent. Absolutely no musical talent.
Me neither.
Like what you saw me do on the keyboards over there, that's the best as I could do. But eventually, as I studied literature more and more. I was always interested in
nice
literature.
one. I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Cool.
See, like, how many jobs?
Nice.
I got more and more serious about my writing and poetry and its structure, rather than it's like, this is a chorus, I guess.
Okay. I guess you laid it off very perfectly for us to jump into the next question. Is about, since you studied literature, do you have any favorite poets or writers that inspired you further to write your own poetry?
A lot of my stuff is, a lot of poems that I like are like Edgar Allan Poe was very kind of dark and thematic.
Yes.
I like Robert Frost because he's more like the language is simple, but there's meaning to it. Like it's not as like in depth. You don't need a thesaurus to figure out what he's saying. A lot of the beat poets, performers that are on YouTube, like there's a channel called Button Poetry. Is all about these performers who go on these open mics, and they're just phenomenal.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Actually, this is off script because I wanted to ask you generally. Would you say that you could turn your poem into a song if you had the right tools?
I've been told that people can see like people who are musically gifted, unlike myself, can like find a way to make a poem into a song because it's all about, from my understanding, it's all about like finding the right rhythm for it, right?
Mhm.
Or the meter. So any poem can be broken down into a song. It's just about, well, knowing how to.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. Like even with musicians, there's often like the common two ways of writing songs. You either write the lyrics first and then you write the music, or maybe more popularly so people write the music and then they put the words into it. But it can happen either way. So maybe we would do that someday. Maybe May and I can maybe find one of your poems and like, this can make a really good song, and then maybe we'll
Why not?
give you a call.
That would be awesome, actually.
Yeah,
That would really be awesome.
Yeah, just as long as I get my royalty check.
Don't worry
Of
about
course.
that.
Everyone wants their royalties, and you'll definitely deserve it. Speaking of poetry, staying in the realm of poetry, do you find yourself writing just purely for yourself, or do you feel like sometimes some of the poems that you write have let's say a driven feeling that you want to impact people and you want this to go out and change people's lives?
It's mostly about like my own personal feelings, and a lot motivated by what I'm going through, what I'm thinking. But some of it is impacted by what's going on in the world and
Okay.
how I feel about that, and me trying to say something about it.
Okay.
So that's your message basically,
Mhm.
and that puts people together.
Yeah, like I found that any kind of art, poetry, music, it's a wonderful way of bringing people together.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a way to help through any kind of mental health issues.
Mhm.
Having a sense of community, a sense of belonging.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow, that really hit home, actually. That was really good. Back to you, Salman.
Well, we're going to stay in poetry. I don't want to go too far, but also I want to ask you about journalism. And since you're doing it as a career, do you see any connection between the two? Do they merge at some point, or are there two separate things you like to keep separate?
They are very, very separate things.
Okay.
The way I write articles versus the way I write myself is very different. If I try to write like that for the paper, I would get fired.
Okay.
Because writing news is more structured, it's
Yeah.
more professional,
Okay.
than my own writing, which tends to be more loose and more, what's the word, casual.
Okay, quick follow up on that point. How do you feel about journalism and poetry in Bahrain, generally speaking? In terms of journalists, without naming names, just how like the profession itself and poetry as well, like in the community, like how well accepted is it? Is it common? Do you see like open mic nights common, or is it something you need to push more?
When it comes to journalism and journalists in general, it's it's one of those professions that people don't think about a lot. Like they would read the news and not think about who's writing it, or not think about like, okay, where did this come from? And it's been a bit of a sentiment these days about like fake news has become a joke.
Yes,
And like
sadly.
everyone's got like their opinions
Yes.
about what's legitimate and what's not.
Yeah.
And a lot of us were just trying to do our jobs. Like we're just here
True.
to write about what's happening in the world and try to get that information across.
Right.
In terms of poetry, there has been like over the last couple of years more and more of these open mic nights and poetry nights. Like Sonder is one of the ones that I go to regularly, and it's been like one of those communities that I said like brings people together, and it really all those people have really helped each other as people and as artists, and myself included. Like I feel like so happy to know so many of them and to have it's one of the things that I've missed now because we don't have that anymore.
Oh, tell
Yes,
me
yeah.
about it. I remember actually, again off script, but I remember when I actually saw you on stage, I was also on the same stage as you.
Right.
You opened up vaudeville and you were doing the poetry for it. And I was doing an acting skit. And I was like, when somebody referred you to me, I was like, I know this name.
I know this face. I know this voice. Where? That's my only problem with people. I just forget faces. But then when I start to recall, I start remembering. And I wanted to ask you as well. A lot of people think that poetry is about romance and about being couples. You seem to have a different approach and expression of it. Could you expand on that?
Well, love poems is like the
Shakespeare.
no, it doesn't have to be Shakespearean. And a lot of a lot of Shakespeare's sonnets are very romantic, but it doesn't always have to be that. Yeah, it's nice to write someone you like a poem. Like, yeah, come on. Who doesn't like a nice little love poem about them?
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, everyone likes to be appreciated in that way.
Okay.
But it doesn't always have to be that sort of flowery, your beauty is the greatest ever. No, it's about expression. It's about feeling. Sometimes, when you're in a relationship and you really have strong feelings about someone, you want to express that in poetry. But it can be about just about anything, really.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not right to limit it. It's like, okay, poems have to be about love.
Do we have a question, sir?
Yes, we do have a question here, and I think it goes back to.
Oh, Ghazi, your beauty is the greatest.
Oh, my lady, that is very touching.
Where are you now? Go ahead.
Where art thou from thy life?
Fine lights.
We have
Shock attack.
a question from the audience on our Facebook Live, and the question is, I think it goes back to when you were speaking about expressing yourself as a form of a coping mechanism. So I think it goes back to that topic. Well, it does. If you strip away the coping mechanisms that you have, what is left? So that means, I'm guessing, you strip away poetry from your life.
What is left?
Ooh.
Big question.
That's a tough one because I don't know. Of course there are other things. Human beings are complex in so many different ways. Do I have other coping mechanisms? Yeah, I've got. Well, my terrible attempts at humor most of the time.
I have my chocolate milk.
You have your chocolate milk. I also like theater. I love acting. Role-playing games are a big part of it. There are many ways, but I think poetry is the biggest one for me. And you take that away, I'll just be screaming into the void every night, like ah. Okay.
So where does your inspiration actually derive from? Like how?
For poetry.
For poetry.
It's very different because each one is inspired by different things. Like sometimes I would just I would come up with a line, and it would just sit in the back of my head, and I would spend weeks okay, I like this. How do I build on this? Okay. And then I would just write it down and then think about, okay, what's the next line? And then build an entire poem just based off one good line that popped into my head while I was trying to sleep. Other times it would be experimentation with structure. A lot of my stuff doesn't really follow a specific style. I would just come up with it okay, this time I want to do something that's a sonnet, so it has to have rhyming couplets, or this time I want to mess with structure, have them break down to different pieces, or
stanzas.
Yeah. Or sometimes just free flow, this
spoken word,
stream of thought, just word vomit.
Amazing. Yeah, that's
so
really cool.
I would think of the structure and then build the poem around it. Like you said earlier with how music is written in two different ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that with me. I would have an idea and then think about how I want to present it.
Perfect. And I was just wondering, do you see this as a profession for you?
Oh, absolutely not. There's no money in poetry. There's no money.
That's what I thought about music, except.
Well, music, at least there's you can see success stories in music. At best, maybe I could get a book out.
Okay.
And then maybe I can, maybe get 30 dinars out of it. I don't know. It'll probably cost more to print than, I can get anything out of it. But I would like to actually do that eventually. But it's not a viable profession, especially here.
Okay.
Yeah, that is true. That is true, and I respect that. Someone go ahead.
Cool. You mentioned something when you answered the coping mechanisms question, and you mentioned something about games. Is it video games, or is it board games, or is it what kind of games that you're into?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
But
Rule that.
Hide and seek, everything.
everything. King of games.
Okay.
No, it's now more than ever. It's all about the tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. That has been like what most of my life has revolved around. And all my free time, I have. It's an addiction. I have.
I know. I have chocolate milk.
Yeah, no, like I have bought so many sets of dice, and it's like
I saw that picture on Instagram. Never too many dice.
never have too much dice.
If you were to roll one though, which one would it be?
I would keep rolling one until it betrays me, then I would chuck it. Like that's
Okay.
What do you mean
We're
by betrays
fireballing
you?
Betrays you how?
Like,
How does the dice betray you?
So you want to roll high, right? You want the higher the better. But if you keep rolling like under like 10 or like just low numbers, like you have betrayed me. So that's why you gotta have options, you know.
I love your sense of humor, bro. Go ahead, Salman.
I learned something new today, that dice can betray you.
Absolutely.
Chuck it behind you if it doesn't roll the way you want it to go. That's very profound, actually. You should write about that. I'll just be in the corner in my chocolate.
Dice, baby.
Oh, okay. Speaking of community, because One Love Party is all about bringing the community together, spreading love, unity. So, do you see poetry and journalism playing a pivotal role in bringing people together and unity and oneness? And have you experimented with that?
Poetry, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Like I said, like the Sonder community, what we call the misfits, are an incredible community of the most like talented, like fun, amazing people that you'll ever meet, and they are like very supportive. Like whenever someone is like wants to like try something or like wants to collaborate on something, they are just incredible. Not so much with journalism. The only thing that people like journalism brings people together is about how much they hate the news and how everything is terrible. Like, it's the only thing we combined on. Like everything is terrible and it's great. Community, I would say for me, it's the tabletop, the role playing community. Like it's so like, and especially in Bahrain, it's a relatively new thing.
Yeah.
Even though like we've had people who have been playing for longer than I've been alive, and but it's been like this boom recently where everyone's sort of getting into it and getting invested in it, and it's always great to have that like the group that's interested in the same thing or is passionate about the same thing as you are.
Okay. Follow up to that, especially I want to focus on the gaming side. I remember back when I was younger, I think we're in the same age group, if I'm not mistaken. Not so big of a difference, but maybe I'm mistaken. If you remember Jawad, the Dome?
Yeah.
They had this cafe, this internet cafe, Cybernet.
Cyberzone?
Cyberzone, that's it.
Yeah.
Where you used to pick hands.
I'm really sorry, but this guy betrayed me. Where are the dice? Throw it! I can't believe what you did to me. Thou hast betrayed me.
I has left you to the wrath of the dragon.
B.
Yes. So, it's like in those days we had like she had mentioned Counter-Strike, Medal of Honor, and then that kind of died out. But I've seen recently with tabletop board games and stuff, places like Raven's Nest come out. Do you have any experience with that?
Oh, absolutely. Like I used to practically live in Raven's Nest.
Okay. And what kind of games they most like? We know Dungeons and Dragons is one.
Yeah, they've got a whole set of board games. Anything from like the casual like party games, like
Monopoly, like stuff like that. Here's my older side.
I love Monopoly.
Yeah, like, you like the idea of Monopoly, but like when you start playing and then that one person cheats.
The backers normally the normal.
So it's everything from like casual, like party games that are mostly just based off social interactions to like some of the more serious ones. Like there's one that the group of my friends used to play called Twilight Imperium, and this is one of those games that takes like around 10 hours to finish. And like we would start off, we would have dinner, and then we would end and have breakfast the next day.
Okay.
And like after like, you know,
He
months-
takes that serious.
Oh yeah.
I think you have a problem. I might need to. Caitlin? We
Dr.
need a doctor.
Caitlin.
No problem.
Throws
Ah!
that. Anyway, we're gonna fireball you
Yes.
off the top of our heads. Let's go.
Okay, since you mentioned the two particular poets, Edgar Allan Poe or Robert Frost, you have to choose one.
Poe.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you, fire or water?
Water?
Okay. Interesting.
Ace card, jack of spades.
What?
Ace card or jack of spades?
Ace.
Ace?
Ace.
That could be 11.
Okay.
Rethink that. You revise your answer. Alright, chicken or beef?
Chicken.
Chicken or fish?
Chicken.
Ooh,
Chicken,
chicken.
is chicken.
Okay.
No, that wasn't.
Okay, in terms of chicken,
Duck. I would definitely go with duck. I prefer duck.
Pecan?
Sure.
drumsticks or breast?
Drumsticks.
Okay.
Wings or drumsticks?
Wings.
I knew it.
Cola or Pepsi?
Cola.
Whoa! Yeah, me too, actually.
Really?
I don't know why.
I don't have one. Coffee or tea? I ask this every time.
Coffee. Iced coffee specifically.
Iced coffee.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Ooh.
That was like a straight up answer.
Easy, yeah.
Anyway.
I have one more.
Okay, he has one more and then we're gonna
move to our next section.
yes.
You prefer writing poetry or reciting poetry?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. See,
that's like asking me if I would like to write lyrics or sing.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I would say performing because I like being on stage. I've had the opposite of stage fright. Like, okay, no, there's a stage. Let me at it. You know.
I like spotlight.
Yes. I like a bit of. I like performing. I like it more because I feel like there's an element of interaction with the crowd and
Attention.
Attention. I do like a bit of attention.
We all do.
Yes.
We all do. That's exactly why we're doing this.
Yeah.
We're totally not insecure. Totally not insecure.
No, shut up. Don't be so loud.
Oh yes, I should have said that in my head.
I'm gonna introduce young Caitlin, my daughter.
No. There's one more thing that Ghazi has to do before he goes.
Oh, you need
We
to
need
recite
a
a
recital performance.
Yes.
Yes. And
Right,
we're gonna
right,
stand
right.
back. You have the floor.
Floor is all yours.
So I need to actually find one because you can see I'm always prepared and I'm a professional.
Right.
So this one's called "This Light Won't Die."
Ooh.
Out! I don't care if it's your show.
Fine. I'm going.
You don't need to tell me. Oh, sorry. Great.
Start again.
You don't need me to tell you that times are tough and people can be petty. I know you're doing your best to get through all the nitty-gritty. But do me a favor, let's take a break from all this wallowing in self-pity. I know what I'm asking for is poetic blasphemy, but you need to hear this from me. Because I see the spark inside each and every one of you beautiful people. A spark that can turn into a brilliant flame once it is mastered. The light which can shine through whatever darkness it is engulfed by. And no matter what happens, this light won't die. Now, say it with me. This light won't die.
This
light won't die.
Thank you.
This
Welcome.
light
Good.
Won't
die.
die.
Good. Now I want you to actually believe it. Find that passion for life that I know is somewhere inside you and never quit. For there will always be time for wallowing later. But for now, think about doing something greater. Thank you.
Woo!
Was it exit?
just-
Am I just
I mean, I was cheersing. It was a fun one.
Where's the doctor?
I need the doctor.
We need a doctor.
Doctor, I need a doctor in the house. I think I have a problem again.
Again.
I'm sorry, I keep falling back into it. I'm sorry.
No more milk.
No more milk.
No.
Just one more.
No more milk.
But I'm celebrating.
Yeah, then you can't celebrate with milk. Thank you.
You were polite about that. I appreciate it. Alright, do you want to sing?
Yeah.
Let's just distract myself from my addiction. Alright. So what are we singing today?
Coming like out from the darkness and into the light.
Okay.
That's like the theme.
Mm-hmm. You're gonna improv for me?
Yeah.
Awesome. You're a cool doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You need a hotline.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I was so alone and feeling down. I didn't want anyone around. I didn't know how life could be so fair. I hated it so much, so much.
Yes.
But then suddenly life changed. There was happiness all around me. I never felt this inside. Life is way too short to be worrying about the darkness.
This light won't die.
This is amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to Christine, who gave me the idea for the skit. It was hard trying to pretend to cry when I'm so happy with all these beautiful people. B, thank you so much. Mo behind the cameras. Salman, of course. Ghazi, and Caitlin. You guys are the best. I love you. We'll see you in 2